Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Wayne Shutsky, editor of the Yellow Sheet Report, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's Q&A. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Please note that we have one candidate running for Senate in Legislative District 27 participating tonight. The questions that will be asked this evening come directly from voters. Leading up to the debate, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Capital Times, the Arizona Agenda, and the Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you. So voters who are watching this Q&A live can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting 480-808-1814, or calling 480-937-1253. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks, and we are scheduled for about a half hour tonight, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Because we only have one candidate participating tonight, instead of a debate, we will conduct a Q&A with Democrat Brittany Barraza, who is running for Arizona Senate in Legislative District 27. So with that, Ms. Barraza, I'll give you a minute for your opening statement.
Okay, thank you so much, Wayne. And I want to say thank you to Clean Elections and everybody helping out here today. My name is Brittany Barraza, running for State Senate in Legislative District 27. It's a new district that was just rewrote or redistricted. And it's taking a couple pieces from a few different cities here in North Phoenix. I've lived in Arizona my entire life, usually always in Phoenix, and I've lived on pretty much every side of Phoenix that you could imagine. The thing that sets me aside from my opponent is the fact that I'm from Arizona, born and raised. I have personally felt the impacts of all legislation that's been passed in the last 3 decades, and I will have a very real, I will be very impacted in reality for the next 10+ years while my children are in school as well. So I have real skin in the game when it comes to the effects of legislation, either passed or opposed. I'm here to be a voice for my community. There's been a growing need for the people here to help them, and I've been given an opportunity to try and be that voice for them. And so I'm here to try to improve my community. I will be striving to provide, support, submit, or oppose legislation that will benefit my community, not oppose legislation that will benefit my community, but oppose legislation that will have a negative effect on my community. And my goal is to help the citizens of Phoenix, or the members of my community, to live a life where they're thriving and not living a daily life of survival.
All right, thank you. So as you mentioned, you're in a newly redistricted area, and the district you're running in does lean pretty heavily Republican. So as a Democrat running, I want to know what your message is to independent voters from the other party, to maybe try and bring them to your side, or let them know that, you know, what policies you support that you think would benefit all the constituents in your district.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any policy that I intend to propose will be fully with the voice of my community in mind. It will be taken from the input from the people of my community. As far as like Republicans, independents, anybody, my goal is to bridge the gap, not widen it. I feel confident that there's many others like myself who feel fatigued by the whole Republican versus Democrat, and it's really turned from Republican and Democrat to corporate and conservative, and whether or not you actually believe in democracy. And it's a tough argument to engage in. But my goal is to welcome and represent anybody and everybody in my community. So that means everyone, Republican, Democrat, Independent. I also think that there's a great benefit to the fact that independents actually really run strong here in this district and in Arizona in general. Because I think that anybody that would be an independent is somebody who's trying to use critical thinking in order to make the right decision as far as what they want in a representative. So a vote, I heard a saying once, a vote is not a Valentine. It is a structure of what you want to see in law, what you want to see done in your community. So if you want, this thing, this benefit or this resource, that's a reason to vote. It's not your Valentine. You can be a Republican and vote for a Democrat. You can be independent, obviously, and vote for anyone. But I'm really hoping to bridge that gap and be kind of a pseudo home for the disenfranchised that don't really feel like they have a tribe if they're not supporting conspiracies and overthrowing democracy for the sake of a single individual. So that's my scope on that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned enfranchisement, disenfranchisement. So there's been some challenges lately to the various forms of voting in Arizona, lawsuits, attempts in legislation to limit mail-in voting, drop boxes, that kind of thing. So do you support having Arizona continue to use the existing forms of voting that we have, like I mentioned, mail-in voting, all these options that we have today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great point and something that is really missed nationally, but is very well known here in Arizona, that mail-in voting has existed and been prominent for the last 2 decades. And the reason being is it's hot here. We can't expect the people of our cities to be standing in record heat in August for the primaries, and November is not that much, there's not that much relief here. So I think what it sounds like nationally is like it gets missed that that's been the dominant form of voting in this state in any case. Mm-hmm. So I firmly support and believe and will continue to hold up mail-in voting, early voting, or voting whichever way that the voter needs to be as convenient as possible. I would strongly oppose any other legislation like we're seeing in Georgia, where it's against the law now to offer refreshments, even offer water and things like that. And that's just, we're here to help the people. We're here to make the lives of the people improved and much better. So I certainly support mail-in voting, and it's proven time and again that it's safe and secure and accurate. And that's been the way that we've determined, in the last 20 odd years. So however many elections that are in that frame. And they've been very Democrat, Republican, so there's no reason not to trust it. And then it's gone through every circuit of the courts that it possibly can, that there should be no question about the confidence in mail-in voting. And I also think that that's another thing that it doesn't behoove my interest to not support our strong system of voting. Mm-hmm. and encourage voters to not have that confidence in voting. I would feel that would encourage them to do the opposite. And what if there's already so many people that don't feel like their vote counts, and now how many people are going to not vote because they think the election was stolen? So
is there any legislation you would support that related to voting? It doesn't, not necessarily getting rid of things, but I know there's been some proposition or attempted initiatives out there to open up voting and change our systems in that way. Is there any legislation in that realm that you would support?
I would absolutely. So if we would have time off work or secured time, just like if you in Arizona, you can, call off and you can get sick and call off and not have to have a specific excuse or doctor's note. That's an amazing piece of legislation that was passed here in Arizona, being a right to work state. But I would support having given time from any employer or making that part of our state's constitution is being given time to vote if you're not a mail-in voter. I would also support registration being automatic. I would also support the registration rollout to be much more available, much more so more resources for that. Like, why aren't we registered when we're in high school, our senior year, when we're picking out colleges? We should also be able to sign up for. We should be able to register to vote in those same platforms and same areas, same settings. So like in high school, when you're getting the most guidance, you should be able to go to your guidance counselor and get, registration to vote and be able to vote when the time comes and be given that time to do that, just like with jury duty, just with any other thing that we're required to do as citizens.
Okay. All right, I want to move on to education. That's also a big issue everywhere, but obviously in Arizona, it's been making a lot of headlines lately. So the legislature did make a significant investment in K-12 funding last year. So in your opinion, is public education adequately funded in Arizona, or would you like to see additional investments?
I think that if our teachers are still paying out of pocket for their own materials and classes, then our schools are not properly funded. If our classrooms don't have enough teachers and supporting staff, then our schools are not properly funded. So I would support an increase of funds or allocating of funds, reallocating. I really, I think that oversight is prominent and it should be looked at more closely. Every dollar should be accounted for, and I don't see that. And that's something that I think that would help with the providing funding, is making sure that we know exactly where our dollars are going and what they're being spent on. But yes, so anything that would support school funding, absolutely. Personally, my personal experience, I have 2 children in elementary school, and under Superintendent Hobbs, their school has provided, things that I do benefit from. They are provided breakfast in class every day with everybody, so they don't have to go in early to get breakfast. The first thing that they're doing is sitting at their desks, eating a breakfast to start their day. Lunch is provided, school materials are provided, and that being said, there's still teachers who, need tissues and hand sanitizer and wipes and things that they would have normally needed without COVID affecting their classrooms, and that's still needed. Every year, teachers are still asking for school supplies, especially mid-year, when the supplies that were purchased in the beginning have run out or run their course or been used up. So yeah, I think, I've had a personal impact from schooling, my children being in school, and I'm very grateful, and I really love the school that they go to. The teachers are very supportive. They do have a lot of resources, but if any teacher is spending a penny out of pocket to provide anything for their classroom in the spirit of education, then they are not being funded enough, and I would support an increase in that.
Okay. What's your position on the universal ESA expansion that passed this year and was signed by Governor Ducey recently?
And that would be the vouchers?
Yeah, also known as vouchers, yeah.
Right. I don't support an increase in vouchers, especially as who they would be geared towards. Charter schools, private schools, a lot of money would be spent speaking of oversight, there would be an immense amount of oversight in that kind of spending a specific dollar amount that we can't even get. We, as people here, aren't even able to get that much of a benefit. I believe it's $7,000 per child that qualifies, and $7,000 for one child for the whole year to any parent would be so much money. It would help with school supplies, school clothes. It would help with health and wellness, co-pays. $7,000 for a child is a lot of money. But that being said, not every child needs $7,000. So spending that much money unequivocally without any kind of guideline as to the income of that child's family is, could be excessive, and it's taking away from another child who needs much more than that. We should be, our taxes and the way that it's used should be equalizers, excuse me. So that's really what I think is that our spending should be, or our funding should be spent where it equalizes the experiences of every child in education.
All right. And so then I want to move on to another big bill that was passed this year. The state invested $1 billion over 3 years for water projects to attempt to secure the state's water future. I'm wondering if you support that plan that was passed this year, and whether you have any other ideas on or legislation you'd like to see to secure Arizona's water future, conserve water, that type of thing.
Water conservation is so important. I like to say that I was born in the long summer. If anybody gets that Game of Thrones reference, because I don't remember a summer where we weren't in a drought. And so water conservation is very important. And I think that the legislation that I would propose in alliance with that would be in regards to energy efficiency as well. So energy efficiency and water conservation are inextricably tied. And when we have an increase in energy efficiency, we have a decrease in, the unnecessary water usage, and we can reduce that amount. So I would support that. I would also support any funding that would go towards an infrastructure for replenishing water sources, clean water. So I think where I would add to that is ensuring the energy efficiency is as a main focus as well, because they're tied together.
And then just going to keep hitting the hits. Another big bill that passed this year was a 15-week abortion ban, which obviously is in the spotlight because of the decision by the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade. We also have a pre-statehood full ban, so there's still some tug of war about which one of those takes precedence. I want to know what your position is on these bans, and what legislation, if any, related to abortion or choice you would support if you were elected.
Unequivocally, I am completely against those bans. I'd also like to note, as a mother, as a female who's actually carried children to term 3 times, it is terrifying. Your first trimester is terrifying. The chances of having a miscarriage, 1 already. Another point I'd like to make about 15 weeks, there's no doctor's appointment, no prenatal care appointment that you have at 15 weeks. Typically, you are seen at 16 weeks, your very first ultrasound at 20 weeks. So only at 20 weeks are you actually seeing the physical fetus, the embryo, the baby, to see their development. So if at 15 weeks we're banning the ability to make a decision about your life and the life of your child or unborn child or fetus or embryo at that point, it's not even an informed decision that can be made. So, and also it doesn't address the fact that oftentimes women are unaware that they have conceived. Typically, and this isn't spoken about a lot, but conception, the date of conception that's noted by an OBGYN as you are pregnant on this day, your clock actually starts 2 weeks before that. So the 40 weeks of being pregnant, the first 2 weeks is the 2 weeks before the egg was fertilized. So we're counting time where there was no actual fertilization even, let alone conception. So there's so much missing time in there where the timeframes aren't based on science. They're not based on actual lived experiences of when you would even determine that there's an issue with the fetus or the embryo. So I don't support a ban on that at all. I would support legislation that prominently relies on the Arizona Constitution, where privacy is a right.
Mhm.
We should have privacy. There's HIPAA laws about what you can talk about, what information that can be released, what information needs to be private, what anyone does with a doctor, a licensed doctor behind closed doors at a provider's facility should be between that person and that doctor. Not just women, everyone. Not just people who can have babies, everyone. So what I go through behind closed doors, what you go through, this should be very consistent, that there should be no reason to discuss or relay that information. Um, Abortion is not an easy thing to make a decision about. If it's regarding your livelihood, if you have the ability, financial stability, the support to take care of a child, that's the biggest. I think that's even harder to make that decision over a medical issue where there's no viability. That's not an easy choice either, but you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Whereas if you're in a living condition where bringing in a child would have a completely negative and detrimental effect on your livelihood, the life that they will potentially have, especially when it's not supported after birth. When you have a child here, you aren't guaranteed any help or support with that child at all. So for people being pro-life, they're really not pro-children and their care. Child care, I think preschool, I would imagine that if we provided universal preschool, that the necessity for abortion would also decrease. And that's not to say that every person that gets an abortion is somebody who is, in need, but I would imagine that it's a significant amount of people who have to decide, where their next meal is coming from, where their next paycheck is coming from. So that's the kind of legislation that I would support that would help make that decision easier. But I would not support anything that would ban a woman's choice to make that decision on their own between them and their provider.
So as a first, if you were elected, you'd be first-time legislator. What experiences do you bring either from your professional life, personal life, experiences, skills that you think you would bring to the legislature that would benefit your constituents?
Absolutely. I have a lot of lived experience. I obviously have not been a politician before, but my lived experience is what will provide me with the best moral compass, I would say, that would best represent my community. I'm a member of the community, and I have been my entire life. I know what it's like to actually grow up here in Arizona, in Phoenix, and what it's like going to school here, what it's like needing to be on reduced lunches, what it's like for my mom to get Medicaid, and food stamps. That's something that is a lived experience that my opponent certainly doesn't have. And anybody in legislation that hasn't experienced that, anybody who already holds a seat and hasn't had that kind of experience, really doesn't know what the impact of their legislation is on their constituents. So that would be, I think, the experience that I have. I also am, my personal career, occupation that is, has been in claims adjusting. So I am very proficient in reading and interpreting law, and applying it the way that it is meant to be applied. So interpreting law with public opinion and, the states and venues, and whether they're liberal, moderate, conservative. So I believe that my actual career would provide me with some benefits and experience in drafting and creating laws and understanding the way that they are written and the way that they are meant to be interpreted.
Okay. So here's inflation. It's a big thing right now. Obviously, it's impacting families all across the state. It's typically something that's looked at through the federal lens. What do you think you could do as a state legislator to help ease the burden of inflation on Arizona families?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a big thing too. I think that supportive legislation can ease other things. So if we increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour, then I know that more families would be able to afford things a lot easier. $3, I believe right now it's about $12 and change. So another $3 an hour, it would make a monstrous difference. I would also support legislation that would put more stringent structure to anything that gets taxed beyond, not taxed, I apologize, charged beyond a reasonable amount. So medical bills, gas, corporations, pharmaceuticals, and I would support a legislation that would monitor and restrict and provide more structure to where corporations aren't making money off of people being sick and then not allowing them to have funds to pay for anything else. I can't control Washington and make them, put a ban on, price gouging. But if I can provide legislation here at home that would, protect the people of our community, then I think that would drastically affect them where it would have the same feeling of a decrease in inflation.
Okay. I want to jump back to schools again. You're a parent. There's been a lot of discussion at the legislature and at school boards across the state about how much influence parents should have in the classroom in determining curriculum and all those things. That we've seen some laws passed related to that. How much influence do you think the legislature should have in dictating what is taught in classrooms?
I think that the superintendent should have the strongest say in that. I think that the people, if legislation can decide what the curriculum in our classrooms, and legislators are not educators, don't think that that would be beneficial to our children in education. I would leave that up to school boards and the superintendent. As far as how much involvement or how much say a parent should have, well, I didn't vote. I didn't get a choice on what my children are being taught right now. But it's because I'm not a teacher. I'm not an educator. I trust in my school and in the teachers that have gone to school and are the experts and educators. I don't think that that's a perfect system in itself, because I know that a lot of teachers have issues with what they're being told, what curriculum that they're being told has to be taught. It's not about the sorry, I apologize. Not the curriculum about the way that it's taught, but more about like the results-based education, like testing-based education that says, well, this many people passed this test. That's how we mark our grade of education. So I think that allowing our teachers to have a greater say and really listening to that, as they are the, they're the ones on the ground with their, speaking with kids and teaching kids and being in that environment. That's really who should be having the say. They're the ones that actually do the teaching. Parents having a say, all curriculum is transparent. Every year I'm given, and I recall as a student that I was given a syllabus every year at the beginning of the year from every teacher who said, this is what we're going to be going over for the entire year. This is what's going to be due at this time. And that's something that I would have to refer back to every year, all throughout the year. So, the idea that we need more transparency in our classrooms, I feel like we already have a lot of transparency. Schools can't keep secrets from parents, and the curriculum isn't a secret, it's provided. It's also encouraged that the parents engage in the curriculum with their children. That's why the parents are provided the syllabus to start with, so that they can help their children go along that path. A parent in education should be a supporting figure and not the complete decider.
Well, that brings us to half an hour. So I will give you 1 more minute, just a closing statement. Anything else you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, what I would like to add is the current state of things in Washington and the investigations that are being taken or undertaken by the DOJ about the fake electors or false electors that were submitted or attempted. I think that that's going to be coming around to Arizona, and my opponent specifically was the false elector that was potentially, was being put forward as making the decision in our votes. My strong feeling is that it's coming down the line that everybody involved in that is getting investigated. So voting for me would be voting for a representative that will be here in Arizona, stay here in Arizona, represent Arizona, take care of Phoenix, take care of what matters at home, and I'm not going anywhere. My opponent attended, he was in attendance on January 6th at the Capitol. I have no need to be at the Capitol. I'm not here to go to Washington. I'm not here to be a statewide senator. I want to represent my district and help my specific community, and I want to stay here to help them. So I just want anybody watching to know that I will be here in Phoenix to represent any and everybody, any constituent in my district, and I'm going to be here to stay. And I would caution anybody who is thinking about voting for my opponent in that they may not be around long enough, and we're going to have to come back around to a vote, do another emergency vote when they are most likely going to be charged or investigated or even removed from their seat, which is a very real possibility.
Thank you. And that concludes tonight's Q&A. Thank you, Ms. Barraza, for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 8th general election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is October 11th and early voting begins October 12th. All registered voters can participate in the general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information.
And if I might say, if you want to check out any more information on me, you can visit my Facebook page, Brittany Barraza for AZ, or you can check out my website, brittanybarraza.com, where I have more information on the various topics that I support and what my priorities are.
All right, thank you.